Incredibly, the Democrats are here to condemn President Trump's recent strikes against narco-terrorists operating in our backyard. Maybe they want to distract from the Schumer shutdown by tying the president's hands and siding with narco-terrorists who have the blood of hundreds of thousands of Americans on their hands. Whatever the reason, this would be foolhardy. If you think I'm exaggerating here, let me remind you of the kind of depraved savages we're dealing with. Recall the Trinidad gang member who tried to rape 22-year-old Laken Riley while she was out for a jog on a college campus. After Laken fought back, this savage smashed her head with a rock and strangled her to death. Also recall the two Trinidad gang members who, after being released into our country by Joe Biden, raped and murdered 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungare. These animals threw this innocent little girl's body off a bridge. Finally, consider the recent arrest of the Trinidad gang leader who kidnapped 3 women and shot them in the back of the head in an alley in Chicago. Only one survived to call for help. These are the sort of horrific acts of violence that narco-terrorists commit against Americans. And of course, these narco-terrorists, many affiliated with Trinidad, also flood our country with dangerous drugs that have taken the lives of tens of thousands of Americans every year, after year, after year. They target every state in our union with their poison. This is among the many reasons why President Trump was well within his constitutional authority to take action against these narco-terrorists that put American lives at risk. These recent strikes fulfilled President Trump's constitutional duty to protect Americans as their elected commander-in-chief. And this should come as no surprise. President Trump stated very clearly and repeatedly during the campaign that he would attack these cartels if necessary. This is simply him keeping his word to the American people. Also, the president's strikes were lawfully sound and extremely limited. Because they've been going on for less than 60 days, they don't even fall within the War Powers Resolution threshold. I would also note that presidential action like this is hardly unheard of or unique. For context, as of the mid-20th century, scholars identified more than 100 military deployments or actions that lacked express prior congressional authorization. I could go back to the beginning of the Republic with the Barbary pirates off the coast of North Africa. But there's another example, much closer in time, and, for that matter, on the border. That would be President George H.W. Bush's decision to invade and topple the government of Panama in 1989 without prior congressional approval. He ordered 12,000 American troops into that country. We toppled Panama's illegitimate regime, we apprehended the country's dictator, and he spent the rest of his life in foreign custody. Now, let's compare these two cases. In both cases, you have the leader of a country that is indicted by the United States courts for drug trafficking. In both cases, that leader is not recognized by the United States government as the legitimate leader of his country. I'd say the comparison ends there because the case is much stronger here than it was in 1989. Maduro also has, I think, a $50 million reward on his head from our government. Maduro is associated with a designated foreign terrorist organization. Noriega didn't have a reward. Noriega wasn't associated with a designated foreign terrorist organization. Maduro is in league with China, Russia, Iran, Cuba. Noriega was not. Yet, George Bush invaded Panama and overthrew its government. I don't hear many Democrats in retrospect saying that this was an unwise action or made our country less safe. And somehow Donald Trump is doing those things merely by striking a few boats of drug traffickers in international waters. Now, even if you had misgivings about these strikes, even maybe if you were a Democrat in Congress in 1989, as some of our colleagues were, and you condemned President Bush for taking action to defend our country, I would still point out that the resolution before us is overbroad. The resolution prevents the president from taking offensive action against any foreign terrorist organization designated on or after February 20th of this year. This includes the Iranian-backed Houthi terrorists in Yemen. It appears our Democratic friends have forgotten that the Houthis are responsible for at least 150 attacks against the United States and allied naval and commercial ships, which have killed at least 3 people. These terrorists have also targeted our friends in Israel, Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, mostly civilians for that matter. So if the Democrats had their way, President Trump would not be able to, for example, strike a secret meeting of senior Houthi leaders. Wouldn't be able to strike imminent attacks on our friends in countries like Israel, Saudi Arabia, or United Arab Emirates. I think we should all agree that we want our president, when terrorists are gathered together for the purpose of planning attacks against American civilians, our troops, or our friends abroad, to have the authority necessary to take action. Now, the Democrats claim, oh, there's a carve-out in our resolution. Oh, we have a saving clause. We have a rule of construction that says our troops can defend themselves. Once again, they're misleading the American people. I invite you to read it closely. It may allow our sailors to defend themselves if these Houthi terrorists shoot a missile or a drone directly at their ship, but it absolutely ties the president's hands if, for instance, we have intelligence about a senior meeting of Houthi terrorist leaders. It absolutely ties the president's hands from protecting our friends in places like Jerusalem and Riyadh and Abu Dhabi. There's no question about that. It's the black letter of the resolution. It only goes for about 3 lines. I'd invite anyone to read it, and you'll understand that the Democrats are once again dissembling. No reasonable person denies the authority of the president to strike a terrorist threat on foreign soil. Yet the Democrats are here tonight questioning the president's authority to do the exact same thing in our own backyard. In international waters, no less, not even foreign territory. This is a dangerous double standard. Therefore, Mr. President, I encourage my colleagues to vote no on this resolution and to get back to the more pressing business of reopening our government. Mr. President, I yield the floor.
Mr. President, let me take this
Senator
opportunity.
from California.
Thank you. Let me take this opportunity to address some of the remarks of my colleague, who has, I think, rightly pointed out the horrors of drug trafficking and those that are engaged in that poisonous, deadly trade. I agree with that. We should do everything we can to fight back against those who are trying to traffic that poison into this country. But here's the thing, and I agree with him about the murderous dictator that is Maduro. But here's the thing. If my colleagues in this Congress want to go to war with Venezuela, if they want to use military force to bring about regime change in Venezuela, or if they want to wage a literal war using the military and armed force to blow up traffickers, then they need to come to Congress and seek an authorization to use military force for that purpose. Because our Constitution is clear. There are essentially 3 circumstances in which we can constitutionally use force. One is if the Congress declares war. We have not declared war on Venezuela. We have not declared a literal fighting war using military troops either, or we authorize the use of military force. We have not done so. Now, the third circumstance in which a president is authorized to use force is in the event of imminent threat of attack from our adversaries. And that is simply not the circumstance here. Instead, what the administration seems to be relying on is a claim that it has the power somehow to put organizations on a list and go after them wherever they may be without the approval of Congress. That's what this resolution is about. Now, my colleague also made an argument about the Houthis. Nothing in this resolution affects the ability to defend ourselves from the Houthis as necessary. The president and the former presidents who have taken action against the Houthis have not done so on the basis of the Houthis being added to some list. Being added to a list, even a foreign terrorist organization list, empowers an administration to put sanctions on that organization, but being placed on a list by the executive does not give any greater authority to use armed force against an organization. The basis in which this president and previous presidents have used force against the Houthis is the Houthis have attacked us. And if the Houthis attack us again, the president will have the Article 2 power to defend ourselves. And nothing in this resolution touches that in any way, shape, or form. But let me just underscore the perils of what we're discussing today. Now, this is an article that just came out. I don't have the chance to vet it. Colombian president claims U.S. bombed Colombian boat in strike off Venezuela. So I don't know whether we have now struck a Colombian ship or what the circumstances were or who was on board. And that's exactly the problem. That's exactly the problem. Now, maybe this is real and maybe it isn't. But the fact that we don't know, the fact that the executive asserts the authority to blow up ships without coming to Congress for the authorization of that kind of force could invariably lead to mistakes, could also lead inadvertently to war with another country. This resolution says, you want to use force against narco-terrorists by blowing up ships, come to Congress for an authorization. Because at this point, you don't have it. If there's an imminent threat of attack, you have all the authority you need under Article 2. But if you want to engage in a war with Venezuela or regime change with Maduro and you want to use military force to do it, you need to come to Congress for an authorization. There being none, these strikes are unconstitutional and unlawful, and I would urge my colleagues to join Senator Kaine and myself in supporting this resolution. I yield, Mr. President.
During remarks on the Senate floor Wednesday, Senator Tom Cotton of Arkansas and Senator Adam Schiff of California clashed over a proposed bill seeking to limit President Trump's authority to order military strikes against alleged narco-terrorists in international waters. Senator Cotton began by sharply criticizing Democrats for condemning the president's recent strikes, arguing that they were both lawful and necessary. He accused Democrats of siding with violent drug cartels that have, in his words, the blood of hundreds of thousands of Americans on their hands. To drive his point home, he recounted several disturbing incidents linked to cartel violence, including the brutal murders of 22-year-old Laken Riley, 12-year-old Jocelyn Nungeri, and 3 women kidnapped and shot in Chicago. Cotton described these as the kinds of horrific acts that justify the president's decision to strike cartels operating near U.S. territory. He defended Trump's actions as constitutional and within his role as commander-in-chief, emphasizing that the operations were limited and did not trigger the War Powers Resolution because they had lasted fewer than 60 days. Cotton also pointed to history, comparing Trump's actions to past presidential decisions that lacked prior congressional approval, such as President George H.W. Bush's 1989 invasion of Panama. He argued that Bush's large-scale intervention faced little long-term criticism, while Trump's far smaller operation was being unfairly attacked. Cotton further claimed that the Democratic resolution was dangerously overbroad, preventing the president from acting against any new terrorist organizations designated after February 20th. He warned that this would block future action against groups like the Iran-backed Houthis, who have carried out numerous attacks on U.S. and allied ships. In his view, the measure would tie the president's hands, even if intelligence identified imminent threats to allies such as Israel, Saudi Arabia, or the United Arab Emirates. The Arkansas senator accused Democrats of double standards, supporting military action under past administrations but condemning it under Trump, and urged his colleagues to reject the resolution. He concluded by saying the president must retain the authority to strike terrorist groups and protect American lives. Taking the floor next, Senator Schiff responded that while he shared Cotton's outrage toward violent drug traffickers, the Constitution does not permit the president to use military force without congressional authorization except in cases of immediate threat. Schiff insisted that Trump's actions against Venezuela and other groups were not responses to imminent attacks, but rather preemptive uses of power that Congress had never approved. He clarified that adding organizations to the government's terrorist list allows sanctions, not unilateral military action. Schiff said the current resolution would not prevent the president from defending U.S. forces if attacked, but would require congressional approval before launching offensive strikes abroad. The California senator warned that unchecked executive military action risks serious mistakes and unintended conflicts. Citing a recent report that a U.S. strike might have hit a Colombian vessel, he said such incidents show why oversight is essential. Schiff concluded that if the administration wishes to engage in armed conflict or pursue regime change in Venezuela, it must first come before Congress for authorization. Without it, he said, these strikes remain unconstitutional and unlawful.